My parents invited me to a fancy family dinner, but told me to sit at the pit in my stomach began forming the moment I turned onto my parents' street, a familiar, unwelcome sensation that coiled in my gut every holiday season. It was a cold dread, as traditional as the scent of pine and cinnamon. I had a feeling this Christmas dinner would be a disaster the moment I walked in. It wasn't a psychic premonition. It was the grim certainty born from 28 years of experience. It's not like I didn't know what I was walking into. It's always the same meticulously orchestrated performance of a happy, perfect family, a play in which I was perpetually miscast. But this year, I had promised myself I would be different. I was determined to hold it together, to play my part with a placid smile, to be the serene, unbothered daughter they couldn't find fault with, despite everything. Let me introduce myself. I'm Sloane, the youngest of 4 siblings, a fact that has defined my existence far more than any personal achievement or characteristic. Being the youngest has never meant being cherished or protected in my family. If anything, it's always been the unspoken justification for them to talk down to me, to treat my life as a preliminary draft of theirs. I'm used to it, or at least, I've learned to build a callus around the wound. I'm 28 now, a fully fledged adult by any standard, with a career, a mortgage, and a complex relationship with my taxes. But to them, I'm eternally stuck in a state of arrested development. I don't have a husband or kids like my older siblings, a glaring omission in their life script for me. But I've been successful in other ways they refuse to acknowledge because they don't fit into their narrow framework of a life well lived. I have a career in graphic design that I'm deeply proud of, a small but fiercely loyal group of friends who feel more like family than my actual family does, and a hard-won sense of independence they can't seem to grasp. For them, life's checklist has only 2 items: marriage and kids. Nothing else registers as a valid accomplishment. Christmas dinner was the annual summit of our family's dysfunction. It's one of the few times of the year when we all gather at my parents' house, a massive, old Victorian place that's been in our family for generations. It's a house that looks stunning in photographs but is a nightmare to live in, with its drafty hallways and floors that creak with the weight of unspoken history. I'd always hated the place. It's cold and distant, a perfect reflection of my parents' emotional landscape. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors I'd never met, their stern, painted eyes seeming to judge my modern life choices. But it's tradition, so every year, I make the pilgrimage. Even though I'd rather be anywhere else, curled up in my own cozy apartment with my cat and a good book, I go because, family. That single word is supposed to excuse a multitude of sins. This year, I parked my car down the block, taking a few deep, fortifying breaths before stepping out into the frigid December air. The walk to the front door felt like a walk toward a dreaded confrontation. I could already hear the cacophony from inside, the shriek of a grandchild, the booming laugh of my brother, the clatter of silverware. I showed up just after everyone else, a strategic move to minimize the gauntlet of awkward small talk. My oldest brother, Reese, was already holding court in the living room with his wife and 3 boisterous kids, gesturing emphatically as if he owned the place. He was the golden child, the firstborn son who had done everything right in our parents' eyes. Then there was Thea, my sister, with her husband and their perfectly cherubic baby, always impeccable, always polished, a walking advertisement for their ideal life. My parents were in the kitchen, bustling around, creating the illusion of effortless control while micromanaging everyone within earshot, making us all feel like we were 5 years old again. As usual, I slipped in quietly, my coat a shield against the inevitable onslaught of questions and judgments about my job, my love life, my general existence. I was hoping to avoid the drama that was sure to unfold. When my mom saw me, her face lit up with that practiced, brittle smile she always wore, the kind that made me feel like I wasn't truly welcome, but tolerated for the sake of holiday decorum. "Sloane, sweetie," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate, her hands patting my back in a dismissive rhythm. "So glad you could make it. Go ahead and grab a seat. We're just about to eat." I barely had time to murmur a response before my dad called from the dining room, his voice booming with that patriarchal authority he used to remind everyone he was still the king of this castle. "Dinner's about ready. Reese, Thea, get the kids situated, please." I stood there for a moment in the entryway, an island in the stream of family chaos, not sure what to do or say. I wanted to say something real, to connect for even a second, but it was Christmas. I didn't want to make a scene, not yet. That's when my mom, in that subtle, devastating way she had of making everything feel like a character lesson I was failing, spoke again, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Sloane, why don't you sit at the kids' table? We've got a special spot for you there with the cousins." I froze. The air left my lungs. For a second, I was sure I had misheard her through the festive din, but the look on her face, a placid, unwavering smile, confirmed it. My mom, with her sweet, saccharine tone, had just relegated me, a 28-year-old woman with a mortgage and a 401k, to the kids' table, the one they set up every year in the corner of the living room with a mismatched array of plastic chairs, paper plates, and half-hearted, crayon-smeared decorations. I glanced over into the grand dining room. The adults' table was a vision of holiday perfection, set with my grandmother's fancy china, glistening glasses of wine, and tapered candles that cast an elegant, grown-up glow. There, at the head of the table, was my dad, looking as smug and self-satisfied as ever, surrounded by my married, procreating siblings. Every seat was filled, no room for me. I looked back at my mom, a Herculean effort to hold back the tidal wave of anger and humiliation bubbling inside me. I could feel the familiar sting behind my eyes, the one I always got when they found a new and inventive way to remind me that, in their world, I wasn't good enough. It wasn't the first time they'd made me feel small, but this was different. This was a deliberate, public demotion. They knew exactly what they were doing. I forced a smile, but it felt like cracking plaster. "Sure, Mom. Thanks," I said, my voice astonishingly steady. She She smiled back, her eyes empty of warmth. There was no apology, no flicker of understanding. This was all about logistics, about keeping up appearances, about making sure the perfect picture in her head remained undisturbed. I don't think she even considered how much it hurt to be dismissed so completely. Without another word, I walked over to the kids' table, my stomach churning with a toxic cocktail of rage and sorrow. It wasn't like I had expected a throne, but for a fleeting, foolish second, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the year they'd treat me like an adult. I sat down on a tiny plastic chair that creaked under my weight, surrounded by toddlers who were more interested in weaponizing their mashed potatoes than in the profound, awkward silence I felt enveloping me. My young cousins were in their own little world, ignoring me completely. I stared at the paper plate in front of me, laden with a sloppy, unappetizing portion of food. It was as if they hadn't even tried to make it look presentable. I could have sworn I saw one of the toddlers drop a chunk of broccoli under the table, and I had the sudden, violent urge to scream. That was when the clarity hit me like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just about a table. This wasn't about tradition or the holiday spirit. This was a statement. This was about them reinforcing my status as less than. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. And in that moment, something inside me, something I had been suppressing for years, finally snapped. I stood up quietly, the weight of the decision pressing down on me, yet liberating me at the same time. I didn't need to shout or make a scene. My silence would be louder than any argument. I just grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, slung it over my shoulder, and walked straight for the exit. As I opened the heavy oak door, my mom's voice called out, a beat too late. "Sloan, where are you going?" she asked, her voice now laced with confusion and a hint of irritation. I didn't turn back. I couldn't look at their faces. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice as cold and sharp as the winter air rushing in. "Enjoy your dinner." The door slammed behind me, the sound echoing with a satisfying finality. The cold hit me like a physical wave, but I didn't care. It was a clean, honest feeling compared to the suffocating atmosphere of that house. My car was parked just down the street, a getaway vehicle I hadn't known I'd need. I was out of there in seconds, the sound of my parents' frantic, muffled calls fading in the distance. I drove for hours, aimlessly, with no destination in mind, just needing the motion and the distance. The city lights blurred into streaks of color through my tear-filled eyes. I finally ended up at a quiet, 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. Sitting in a worn vinyl booth by myself, I ordered a black coffee, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this much white-hot rage and profound relief all at once. And that's when my phone, which I'd tossed onto the seat beside me, started blowing up. It buzzed and lit up relentlessly. Messages, missed calls, the usual panicked barrage. I glanced at the screen. It was my entire family, a digital firing squad. Reese, Thea, even my dad, all calling and texting. But the one that stood out the most was from my mom. "Where are you? We need to talk. This isn't funny, Sloan." A bitter smirk tugged at my lips, the kind that had been brewing all evening. I wasn't about to pick up. Not yet. The ball was in my court now. They had no idea what was coming. I set my phone face down on the table and sipped my coffee, watching the steam curl up into the sterile, fluorescent air. What would I do next? That was the question. And trust me, they wouldn't like the answer. I sat in that diner for what felt like an eternity, my phone buzzing every few minutes like a trapped insect. The messages grew more desperate, each one a clumsy attempt to reel me back into their game. Reese sent one first. "Sloan, this isn't funny. Where are you? You're embarrassing everyone." Classic Reese, always worried about appearances. It was followed by another from Thea. "Mom is panicking. We just want you back. Please don't do this." Then my dad, blunt and authoritarian as ever. "Come on, don't act like a child. Get back here now." I didn't respond. I didn't owe them an explanation. They had made their choice when they treated me like a second-class citizen at their precious, perfect dinner. All I had ever wanted was to be treated like an adult, an equal. But instead, they had decided I was still the baby who needed to be tucked away with the toddlers. After about an hour of this, I finally picked up my phone to check the messages again. The tension was starting to feel thick, as if they were slowly realizing I wasn't going to just roll over and come crawling back. Then, my mom's new text popped up, and it made my stomach twist into a tight, painful knot. "Sloan, I don't understand why you're doing this. Your siblings are concerned, and this is ruining Christmas. Don't make this about you. You're being selfish." I stared at the message, the words blurring. Selfish? They were the ones being selfish. The whole night, the whole of my life in their orbit, had been about their image, their expectations, their narrow definition of success. I had been nothing but a prop in their little stage play of perfection, but to her, I was the problem. Typical. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this point. Instead, a cold resolve settled over me. I just hit the block button on her number. She wasn't going to manipulate me into feeling guilty. Not this time. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction anymore. I had a plan. I had been wronged by every single one of them, not just tonight, but for years. And tonight, I was going to make sure they knew just how much they had messed up. Later that evening, after I had finished a plate of lukewarm fries and the adrenaline had worn off a bit, I decided it was time. I pulled up the family group chat, the digital town square where they all vented about everything and anything. There were already a dozen messages about me. "This is ridiculous. She's acting like a child. What's the big deal? We didn't mean it like that. I think she's just overreacting. She's always so sensitive." I scrolled through them, my fingers itching with a desire for retribution. I knew I could just ignore it, block them all, and disappear. But that would have been the easy way out. No, I needed them to feel it. I needed them to understand that their casual cruelty had consequences. I started typing, slowly at first, but then my words picked up speed, a torrent of suppressed frustration finally breaking free. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about everything they had ever done to me. "You guys don't get it, do you? You really, truly don't. This isn't just about a seat at a table. It's about how you've treated me my entire life. Like I'm not good enough. Like I'm invisible unless you need something from me. I'm the only one who doesn't get praised for following the same script you all did. Get married, have kids, play the game. You celebrate every mundane milestone of your approved lives while completely ignoring the life I've built for myself. I have a career I love, friends who respect me, a life that makes me happy. But because it doesn't look like yours, it means nothing to you. So maybe it's time you all recognize that. I paused before hitting send, letting the weight of my words sink in. For the first time in forever, I felt like I had control over the situation. I wasn't begging for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to be their little project to fix. I pressed send. It didn't take long for the messages to flood in. My phone pinged over and over, each message more frantic and defensive than the last. The first one was from my dad. Sloan, this is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. Get over yourself. Thea quickly followed. You can't just leave like that and not expect everyone to be upset. What did you think was going to happen? You ruined the evening for everyone. Reese chimed in. We didn't do anything wrong, Sloan. You need to calm down and come back before we're all ruined by your tantrum. Each message hit harder than the last. They still didn't get it. They were still trying to pin it on me, still making it my fault that they treated me like garbage. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I'd been thinking about for a while now. I opened up the Photos app on my phone and started scrolling, back through years of forced smiles and awkward poses. There it was, an old picture of our family, taken years ago, right before things really started to fall apart. A perfect Christmas photo, with everyone smiling and happy in their matching sweaters. Everyone except me, that is. I was there, of course, squeezed onto the edge of the frame like an afterthought, my smile painfully strained. But I knew the truth behind their perfect smiles. I knew the argument that had happened just moments before, the cutting remarks that had been made, the dismissive gestures. I took that photo and, without hesitation, posted it in the family group chat. But this time, I added a caption. Here's to the perfect family, always making sure the youngest one knows their place. Then, I turned off my phone. I let the silence settle around me, feeling like I was finally free from their invisible chains. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, I didn't care. They had pushed me too far, and now I was done. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up in a cheap motel room. The silence was absolute. For the first time in 28 years, I wasn't being woken up by the sounds of my family, by the pressure to perform holiday cheer. I just lay there, watching the dust motes dance in the sliver of sunlight coming through the curtains. It was the most peaceful Christmas morning of my life. Eventually, I plugged my phone into charge and with a sigh, checked it again. The notifications were as relentless as I expected. Dozens of missed calls, texts that ranged from angry to vaguely apologetic, but all of them coded in an underlying frustration that I had dared to disrupt their holiday. I scrolled through them all, reading their words with a sense of grim satisfaction. They were unraveling, and I wasn't going to make it easy for them to put everything back together. My mom, having been unblocked, had sent the longest text. I don't know what's gotten into you, Sloan. You're acting like this is about us when it's really about you. You can't just run away from your family like this. You're tearing us apart. Please come back. Christmas is ruined without you. This isn't who you are. There it was, the masterclass in guilt tripping. The attempt to twist the situation so that I was the villain. They always did this. Made me feel like I was the one causing trouble for simply wanting to be treated with basic respect. Then, my dad's message. This is childish. We need to talk about this when you calm down. And of course, Reese, if you think walking out of dinner was going to make a statement, you're wrong. You're making it worse. You owe us an apology. An apology? For what? For standing up for myself for once? For demanding to be seen as an equal in a family that only valued me when it suited them? I wasn't apologizing for anything. But then there was Thea's message. It was different from the others. It wasn't angry or demanding. It was almost pleading. Sloan, I know you're upset, and I understand why, but this isn't the way to fix things. You're my sister, and I love you, but you're pushing everyone away. Please, just come home. We can talk about this. It's Christmas, for goodness sake. I stared at her words for a long while. I had always been closest to Thea. She was the one who used to defend me when the others would gang up on me as a kid. But as we got older, she had been assimilated into the family doctrine. Now, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. Not after everything she had let slide, everything she had silently endorsed with her inaction. I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to respond. I wanted to explain to her that I wasn't being a diva or causing drama, that I was simply drawing a line in the sand. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I typed out a short reply. I'll think about it, I sent, and then set my phone down, feeling a pang of guilt. But I shook it off. I knew I couldn't go back to that table, not without a seismic shift in how they viewed me. The day dragged on. More messages came. Some were from family friends, asking where I was. They were genuinely concerned, but I didn't feel like explaining myself to anyone who wasn't part of the problem. Then, of course, another barrage from my mom. But one message from Thea stood out. Sloan, I've been talking to Reese and Mom. They're really upset. And honestly, so am I. We're a family. You can't just isolate yourself from us like this. If you don't come home soon, it's going to get worse. Please don't make this more complicated than it has to be. More pressure, more manipulation. And still, no real understanding of what I was going through. They weren't hearing me. They weren't listening. I knew what they were doing. They were trying to guilt me into coming back, to make me feel like the sole cause of all the problems. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was from my dad. Sloan, we need to talk. You can't just keep running away. You're going to regret this. It hit me like a ton of bricks. The same words, the same manipulative guilt trip. As evening approached, I found myself sitting alone in the motel room, staring at the empty chair across from me. A part of me, an old, conditioned part, wanted to give in, to go back and make nice. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I went back now, it would be an admission that I wasn't worth fighting for, that all those years of being pushed aside were acceptable. call. Then the phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the decline button, but something inside me told me to pick up. Maybe I was finally ready to hear what she had to say. I took a deep breath and pressed the green button. Sloan, my mom's voice came through, sounding tired, exasperated. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. Look, she continued, her voice softening into a more manipulative tone. We're family. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you're pushing everyone away. Your dad is upset. Reese is upset. Thea's. She paused, clearly trying to gather her words. I'm upset, Sloan. I almost laughed. They were upset? After everything they had put me through? I could feel the old anger bubbling up, but I swallowed it down. I'm not pushing anyone away, Mom, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm just not playing your game anymore. I'm not going to sit at the kids' table, be treated like I'm invisible, and pretend everything's fine just to maintain your perfect Christmas card image. She was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear her processing my words, trying to find a new angle for her guilt trip. You can't just leave us hanging like this. Your dad tried so hard to make Christmas special. The whole family is here. It's not just about you, Sloan, she finally said, her voice almost pleading. You're breaking the family apart. You know, I've spent my entire life trying to make everything work. I shot back, the words pouring out now. Trying to fit into the mold you all created for me. But no one ever saw me, did they? You didn't want me as an adult, Mom. You wanted me to stay the little kid forever. And tonight was the last straw. She was silent again, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of something new in her silence. It wasn't just strategic. It felt like maybe, just maybe, it was hitting her. It wasn't just about a seat at the dinner table. It was about how I'd been treated all my life. Finally, she sighed, a long, weary sound. I get it. I really do. But I'm still your mother, and I just want us to be a family again. I let her words hang in the air for a moment. There was a time when I would have run back to them, desperate for that crumb of affection, but I wasn't that person anymore. I'll think about it, I said, repeating my earlier response. But this time it was different. It wasn't about me caving. It was about me taking my time. It was about them realizing that I wasn't just an afterthought. All right, my mom said softly. I hope you'll come back soon. I just want you to be happy. I hung up the phone and sat back, breathing deeply. It wasn't over. It wasn't a neat, clean resolution. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control of my own story. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, they would finally see me for who I really was. I put my phone down and stared out the window, watching the snow fall softly in the darkness. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally free. And as for Christmas, it wasn't ruined, because for the first time in my life, I was taking care of me. The rest could wait. As I sat there, letting the snow fall gently outside, I couldn't help but wonder, did I do the right thing? Or did I just walk away from something that could have been fixed? Let me know in the comments.